Look at the global economic map. Most people assume the massive gap between rich and poor nations comes down to historical lottery tickets or geographic anomalies. They think national wealth is an accident. But when you run a forensic audit on global balance sheets, you find a highly deliberate, clinical script. The world's most dominant sovereign empires do not wait for luck. They construct their wealth through a specific 10-step sequence known as sovereign system scaling. True financial dominance, whether you are managing a nation's treasury or your own personal bank account, is the result of executing a structural algorithm. The sequence begins by establishing a physical perimeter. Violent crime acts as a terminal economic prison. When gang cartels dictate the streets, inbound capital traffic vanishes. In 2022, El Salvador initiated a high-friction crackdown, incarcerating over 85,000 gang members to reset their domestic safety baseline. Once physical safety is secured, a nation must eliminate administrative friction. In the 1960s, Singapore was infested with systemic bribery. Under Prime Minister Lee Kuan Yew, the state replaced arbitrary human gatekeepers with a clinical, zero-tolerance anti-corruption protocol. This shift toward rule-based transparency turned the nation into a global capital magnet. By making the rules predictable and fair, Singapore transformed itself into a hub for multi-billion-dollar institutional pools. No macro engine can scale while its human capital lives in a state of structural fear. Security is the mandatory baseline for all subsequent growth. With the perimeter secured, a country transitions into aggressive capital multiplication through infrastructure. Since the 1990s, China has funneled trillions into over 40,000 kilometers of high-speed rail and automated shipping ports, proving that economic expansion follows the removal of logistical friction. Once the physical roads are paved, the focus must shift to cognitive processing power. Following the devastation of the Korean War, South Korea possessed no natural resources and faced extreme poverty metrics. They escaped this limitation by betting their entire balance sheet on specialized education and technical universities. Today, South Korea maintains a 98.8% absolute literacy rate, producing the high-value system builders behind conglomerates like Samsung and LG. Before a state can extract wealth from the global board, it must first optimize its horizontal trade routes and the internal processing power of its citizens. Nations with vast natural commodities often fall into the resource curse, where raw dependency destroys secondary industry. The United Arab Emirates bypassed this by treating their oil exports strictly as launchpad capital, reinvesting those margins into global finance and logistics. Operating as a lone actor carries a severe risk penalty. After World War II, Germany rebuilt its economic leverage by hard-coding itself into the central architecture of inter-sovereign networks like the EU and NATO, ensuring its export markets were protected by a collective institutional shield. The most resilient nations graduate from selling commodities to controlling intellectual monopolies. The Netherlands secured this via ASML, which builds the only machines on Earth capable of printing advanced microchips. Because the tech is irreplaceable, the rest of the world is forced to pay their premium. Apex nations do not rely on what is beneath their soil. They scale by engineering proprietary systems that the global supply chain cannot operate without. Once a nation has built its physical, logistical, and technological moats, it moves to the final stage, psychological branding. By exporting its media and behavioral standards through Hollywood, the United States dictates how the global population thinks and consumes. This cultural dominance cements the nation's status, allowing its financial institutions to benchmark the flow of international capital and set the pace for global commerce. To ensure this wealth lasts for centuries, nations must master distribution. Norway neutralized internal instability by trapping their volatile oil windfalls into a $1.5 trillion savings fund, transforming a finite resource into a permanent generational safety net. By following this sequence from security to culture, a nation creates a self-sustaining gravity that protects its prosperity against future volatility. This 10-step roadmap reveals a core truth about system design. The structural principles used to scale a national treasury are the exact same levers required to scale your personal balance sheet. Assess your reserves. Under 100,000 in liquid capital, enter the South Korea phase. Trade hours for high-income skills to build cash flow assets. Over 100,000? Execute the Norway model. Automate excess currency into index funds to compound independently. Whether you are building your engine from scratch or protecting its momentum, the requirements remain the same. Secure your perimeter, invest in your skills, and capture your margins. The blueprints for sovereign power are now on your board. You can either remain a passive spectator drifting on default consumer habits, or you can begin engineering an asset machine built for absolute control. Subscribe, activate your notifications, and comment #future below to lock in your position on the grid. Stop trend chasing like an amateur, protect your systems, and start building like a financial architect. We'll see you for the next masterclass.